few days ago, I had the opportunity to meet with two fellow artists in Oil City, Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, our plans fell through, but I continued on to Oil City to do some exploration of my family's cemetery plot in Grove Hill Cemetery. My mother's side of the family was from Oil City, and I knew that members of her family were buried in an Oil City cemetery, but I had no idea which cemetery they were buried in. So what I did is I wrote to the Oil Region Library Association and attorney Ted Welch, and he was with the Cemetery Association. And I did this to get the location of my great-grandparents' burial sites, which I had their dates of birth and their dates of death as being in Oil City, and I sent them the dates of both their death and their birth and their death. And both organizations were just phenomenal. I mean, both organizations were more than gracious in helping me find the location of their graves and of my family. The Oil Region Library Association sent me the obituary for my great-grandfather, Duncan McIntyre, and the section and location of his burial sites within the Grove Hill Cemetery. So I found out that my great-grandfather was buried in the Grove Hill Cemetery. I just assumed my grandmother would be there, but I had no idea if anybody else was there. I had no idea anyone else was buried there. And I also worked with a wonderful woman named Emily of the Cemetery Association to help me locate the exact location of the graves. So after I gathered all this necessary information, I jumped in my car and I headed for Oil City. Well, I've made it. I'm here at the cemetery. And look at that. It's right next door to a Frisbee golf course. That's kind of funny. Not only are my great-grandparents here on my mother's side, her parents are buried here. And her aunt and uncle, my great aunt and uncle, are here, as well as some other people that I'm not certain who they are. Somebody named Melvin Sutton. And there's a William Sutton. I'm not certain who they are. It's a beautiful day though. When I arrived in Oil City, I was filled with a mix of emotions. There was a mix of anticipation and reverence, knowing that I was about to connect with my family's history. I felt this wave of emotion as I approached the family plot. It was the McIntyre plot. McIntyre is my mother's side of the family, my mother's side of the family. And once I got to the family headstone that marked the plot for the family, I was overwhelmed. I had no idea that there was going to be a big marker saying McIntyre. And I didn't know there was going to be a whole bunch of grave sites. I thought it was going to be my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother. So I just stood there quietly for a moment, feeling humbled and comforted to be in the presence of my ancestors' final resting place. It was very humbling. It was at the same time, it was peaceful. And then I walked among the graves, reading the names and the dates etched into the headstones, and I imagined their lives and the legacy they left. I found my mother's parents' burial sites too. I was totally blown away. I did not know that my grandfather Sutton and my grandmother Sutton were both buried at the same burial site. I had no idea. And when I found their burial sites nearby, I felt this sense of connection, and I honored their memory. I remembered things my mother had said about her father. She loved her father a great deal. She was very, very brokenhearted when her father died in 1945. I think it was 1945 or 46. She was just a young lady, 17 or 18 years old when her father died. And discovering the plots of my great-grandparents as well as my great aunts and an uncle, and a couple of people I didn't even know existed, but my Aunt Ann McIntyre was buried there. Mary Brown was buried there. And I spent a great deal of time reflecting on the generations that came before me and the continuity of family ties over time. I spent also a lot of time on the significance of the moment and feeling grateful for the people who had been in my life, as well as the opportunity to pay respect and deepen my understanding of my heritage. And that's when it struck me that this family, my mother's side of the family, found it very important to be family. Here they are buried in the same plot of land, and it was that important to them to stay together. And the whole experience was very cathartic. It was very moving, and it made me feel like it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. I had this feeling of peace and calm afterwards, and I realized that it's okay to die. I mean, that might sound kind of weird, but I felt like, wow, I'm going to die one day, and I'm either going to be 6 foot in the ground or I'm going to be sitting in an urn, somewhere with my cremated remains in somebody's shelf. But it also made me realize that my mom's family grew up in an era where family was so important, where it was emphasized that you be family, that you stay together. But it was a different time, and it struck me how nowadays the family isn't that important. In 21st century, families are all over the country. They're splintered. I mean, I've got a brother in North Carolina. I've got a sister in Southern California. I've got a brother in Southeast Ohio. I've got a cousin in Montana, or I've got another cousin in Florida. And, they didn't move to these areas of the world like my ancestors did. My ancestors moved from Scotland to America to find a better life. Some of the people, including myself, I moved to Phoenix at one time just because I wanted to be in Phoenix. It was something to do, something I'd always dreamed of doing. There wasn't necessarily a better economy there. There were better houses back then. 22 years ago, you could buy a house for a lot cheaper. But back when my ancestors came across the boat, it was a major commitment. It was a major investment in time and finances and money. You had to take a ship across the ocean. There were no airplanes. And their lives were very difficult. My great-grandfather worked in the oil fields. He worked in construction in the oil fields. There's no way that was an easy job. And he was a well-respected, kind gentleman, from what his obituary said. So that was my experience at the Grove Hill Cemetery in Oil City, Pennsylvania. And I'm grateful I got to, quote, meet the rest of my family. It was a mind-blowing experience, and it gives me a new perspective on them as people and them as a family. So I hope you like this video. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment. Give me the thumbs up. Subscribe. Have a good day. Bye.